Hi, Elizabeth. Good evening to you.
I'm
How are you?
awesome, Nicolette. Lovely to see you and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed today. I'd like to introduce myself formally. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, I would like to read your introduction for our listeners today, and then we can get right into business. So, hello, everyone. Excuse me. We have Elizabeth Bennett here with us. With over 35 years of teaching, administration, and coaching experience, Elizabeth offers a unique blend of leadership, vision, and vast knowledge background. She is a former, now retired, award winning principal who has a relentless passion for empowering people to take on their lives with joy and love. Elizabeth is dedicated to sharing her desire to create positive and connected relationships, focusing on community and business leaders, educators, and especially parents. And yes, she even works with teens to help them see alternative perspective.
Well,
Welcome,
thanks.
Elizabeth. Wow. Okay, so many to unpack. But first, can you share with us what was it like growing up as an Elizabeth
Wow.
Bennett?
Um, it was a little bit challenging. I was, I'm an only child. And so, I had responsibilities early on, and expectations were, you know, do good things, stay out of trouble. You know, children should be seen and not heard. Money doesn't grow on trees. Don't give you something to cry
Mm.
about. The pendulum was way over here. And now it's swung way over here, and that's not a good place either. But we can talk about that later. So there were challenges with that. I mean, some, good things, but it was a bit of a struggle. I lived through some domestic violence with my family. My father was, he was frustrated from work, and that's part of what I talk about now too. When I look at workplace and having courageous conversations in workplaces, the impact that it has when it doesn't go well there, and then that comes home. And so, that was a bit of a struggle. Um, and so with that, I just wanted to give back to people. I wanted to, at school, I would, help collect money for charities or, Christmas baskets where we would gather food items or, do things to help other people, because that helped to for me to avoid what was going on back there and see the pleasure and the excitement and the enthusiasm from people that I was part of helping with.
Wow. Now you just made me curious. Like you said, this pendulum was on this side, swung this side, and now it has swung the opposite
Well,
direction.
in the lives that we're living now and the things that we're seeing now, when I was growing up, it was all about respect and doing good things, and children should be seen and not heard, and money doesn't grow on trees. And now with that pendulum swinging way in the other direction, sometimes children know far too much. That there needs to be times when adults have conversation without their kids and with, setting plans. And I get that it's, we're trying to navigate it. We because I have 3 grandchildren and 3 adult children, and 2 of them have the children. And I listen to some of the conversations that they have just around their kids. And it's like, how come some of this can't be private with them? And that, they don't need to hear everything, because although kids aren't speaking, they're listening and they're watching and they're paying attention. And that becomes part of the package of what kids struggle with, because then they begin to, as they grow, they begin to hear things and try and say, oh, well, my parents expect this, or, I've been labeled to have a learning disability, or, or I'm ADHD or so on. And they live into it rather than saying, fine, that might be a challenge that I have, but I'm not the challenge. I have a learning disability, or I have a challenge with, ADHD or whatever. And as I learn and grow and develop skills and strategies, that doesn't need to be who I am, but rather a challenge that I have, right? And that's the difference. sort of what I've seen over the years in teaching and education, having conversation with parents and kids who feel labeled, and it holds them down rather than just pushing that aside and living a full life.
You brought up a very great point earlier. You said that sometimes some of the conversations that the parents or the adult are having, and then these types of conversations shouldn't be had in front of children, right? And then they should be done in private. So what are the nuances or the differences? Like, what can we talk about in front of kids, and what can we not? What shouldn't be talked, in front of kids?
Well, I mean, and
Because I have a younger
maybe
sister.
that's just because I'm a little old fashioned, or a little maybe not in that same place to understand this new generation. But certainly there are things like when you're talking about finances, right? They don't need to be having conversations unless you're saying, I'm teaching you how to save money, or I'm doing this or that. But the worry and the challenges, and sometimes the arguments that people have, because that money is one of those topics that separates people, right? So with some
Yeah.
of those, not all of that conversation needs to be had with children listening. So I'll give you an example of that. A student, we were going on a field trip, and I happened to see the student come in, and I was chatting with her, and I said, "Hey, are you excited about today's field trip?" and so on. And she said, I can't go. And I said, "Well, why can't you go?" And she got a little embarrassed, and was a little teary and so on. And, we were walking close together. So, I mean, other kids weren't going to hear what was going on. And she said, "My parents can't afford it." And so, I just left that for that moment. And she said, "And I didn't get my permission slip signed." So I thought, well, we were doing last minute things. I would just give her mom a call and say, "Hey, the kids are going today. Is it okay?"
How much
It
was
wasn't
it?
very expensive,
How much was
but
it?
you'll understand the story in a minute, right?
Right.
So
Of course.
I
Yeah,
picked up
yeah, yeah.
the phone, and I called her mom, and I said, "Hey, this class is going on their field trip." She said that she didn't get the field trip form signed, and I'll do a verbal approval of it if you just say it. She said, "Well, how come she's not going?" And she said, "Well, she told me that she couldn't afford it," right?
Uh,
Well, the mom was beside herself. So she asked if she could come to the school and have a conversation. And she said, in the meantime, say yes, she can go. And I said, don't worry, because we'll take care of it. Because we do from time to time if we know students and families are really having a difficult time. And so mom came in I think it was at the end of the day. And, we had this conversation, and the mom was a little beside herself with it, because she said, "There's no reason for us not to be able to send her. We certainly have plenty of money." And then she said, "Can I have my daughter in this conversation?" And I said, "Sure." So, we invited her in. I told her she wasn't in any trouble, but, her mom just wanted to understand. And the daughter said, "This is what I heard, that there was some struggles and so on." Well, what she heard was that her mom and dad were talking about helping out another relative in the family. She understood it to be, this is what,
the
that's right.
whole.
Right. So she didn't hear the whole story, nor did she really need to. But because she did, she thought that it was them. And so she was saving her parents money for not having to go on this field trip. So there are things that, we hear partial stories, or what we hear because of children's development and so on. They might not understand the complexity of the story. And so then they take that on personally, and it becomes a burden for them. And, one of the tools or one of the things in that backpack that is their invisible backpack. So their worries and their concerns, and, do they have friends? Are they wearing the right clothes? Are the right color? Is their hair the right color of the moment? Right? Do they, if they like somebody, how do they approach that person? If they have exams, if there's all kinds of stuff going on, and kids wear that as their invisible backpack. And the one that you and I see as parents and teachers and so on, the books and the field trip form that's crumpled up at the bottom of the bag, and, a science experiment that used to be a lunch that's still in that bag, that kind of thing. So
Mm.
those are that's why it's important for us to be able to help kids understand and recognize that they are worthy, because, you said in your title, are we worthy, or how, if we are feeling worthless or so on. And that's something that comes up with kids, because if they don't get
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged, if they don't feel like anybody listens to them, if they don't feel like they're heard or that they're valued, they don't know how to fit in. So they're looking for someone or something to find that value. And too often it ends up being their cell phone, because they're looking for approval. They're looking for their likes. They're looking for acknowledgement. And at the same time, they believe that that's a virtual perfect world that you and I know doesn't exist, because the only thing you see on Facebook is the fancy and the elaborate and money that we're throwing out. And that's not the life that really exists in the world.
Oh wow. I am just like reflecting because I have my youngest sister is about 12, and she's, of course, and I've been away from home since I was 17, so she's 12, so now I'm 34. So and it's yeah, I went out, I left home because I wanted to find my own self, my own thinking, my own mindset, because of course whatever that you mentioned, money doesn't grow on tree. I hear that, like, you gotta work hard, you gotta hustle, grind to get the dough, right, to bring the bacon home. And then when I come back and see my sister, it's being taught the same way, not intentionally but unconsciously, because my parents are, I would say, boomers or Gen X, and I cannot blame them for the way that they are. But because this is their first time here as well, this is their first time being parents, and maybe they've learned as well. We all evolve at the same time, but I purposely took myself out to see if there's, I can develop something different or gain a better understanding, like from a bird's eye view. But for them, and no, in no way that I'm blaming them, because I am who I am because of them. So, and I love them very much. But it's just, if you see it, the younger generation, like I come in and I can give her a different perspective. But imagine if there are no family members, or that kid is not exposed, nobody in the family is exposed to that kind of understanding, that we have to see the bigger picture, like what you said, like there is the other side of the pendulum, right? And then, but to say, but if I were to again reflect, the consciousness is it's getting higher, but slowly, I think, I feel,
Well, and it, like you
about
mentioned,
all of
it
this.
is about age too. I mean, I looked at the time when, when I was growing up with my family, and all they knew was what
Mm-hmm.
they knew and what
Yeah,
they experienced in
right.
their own lives. And because there weren't books and there weren't things to say, or the internet or anything else to look stuff up to. I
Yeah.
mean, the folks that they had conversation with, everyone was raising children at the same time, right? And so,
Mm.
but at that time as well, things were very secretive. And
Oh
whether
yeah,
it was
for
domestic
sure.
violence, or whether it was things that were going on, or illness or whatever, you couldn't share any of that. You couldn't have conversation with people, because you didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
not do the right thing for your family, right? And
Yeah.
what I've seen over the years, and the experiences that I've had through education and being with thousands of children and meeting families and so on. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities, but some of that is that you have to step into them. And that's why, like, the book I wrote is called Courageous Conversations, right? Courageous Conversations, a
Mm-hmm.
guide for parents to understand and connect with their teens. And for me, courage means to step out of your comfort zone. It means to be a little bit vulnerable and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. but I want to be able to understand your perspective and where you're coming from as a teenager and understand, what's been going on for you. And if there are ways that I can help guide you, or like you're doing with your sister, to say, these are the experiences, or these are things that are going on, or this is sometimes why there are rules in place or boundaries. This might be why your mom and dad are saying, no, she can't go here, or she can't do this, or so. And you have that opportunity to be able to say, that's why these things are in place. It's not to punish you, but to keep you safe. Because we all know that there are so many ways that kids get it,
Sidetrack.
or
Yeah.
they get involved with unsavory characters, or they are, predators are out there, mixing it up in the world and pretending they are, young people. And so you share your secret thoughts with someone that you imagine is the same age. And you have opportunity to be
Yeah.
able to help your sister understand. But most families don't necessarily have that background or that perspective or that understanding. And they just think that the rules are the rules and that's the way it is. And that's
That's
what that
true.
means. And now what we're trying to do, I think, with the positive intention of the internet and the positive intention of
Mm-hmm.
people, is to be able to say, okay, well, let's take a look at a different perspective. It doesn't mean what you've done is wrong, because this is not about judgment, but this is just about helping you see and be able to maybe have a different kind of conversation with your child. Or in a workplace, it might be, if you're the manager or the business owner or whatever, this might be a different way to approach having a conversation with one of your employees and saying, hey, I've noticed that, your performance is down a bit. What's going on? That question doesn't cost anything. What it does is it costs you to be in silence and not have it. The same way it is
Mm-hmm.
for you if you don't share what's going on with your sister. The silence you keep, or the information that you keep from her, not intentionally, but sometimes depends on what your relationship is, then that doesn't give her the bigger picture or the different perspectives to be able to make informed decisions, or have different conversations, or show up differently even in her own relationship with her friends, or if she's got someone she's interested in, or even just her buddies around school and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. I really think that this is a very refreshing conversation I spoke to so many different people, and yesterday just one. And then now with you, again, it brings me to see, okay, what's it like right now? Conversations surrounding kids and teens. Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait. Your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now. Because social media, like you said, it should be used for good, but we cannot escape the
Right.
duality of it. Like in life, everything has dual has duality. Yeah. And you mentioned about your book, right? Can you okay, how did the thought of writing that book start?
Probably about 25 or 30 years ago. So when I first started teaching, and I noticed that kids
Uh-huh.
were, you know, they were hanging out by themselves, or they didn't feel like they had friends. Or, I was also a classroom teacher, and I was an athletics coach. So sometimes kids would share those things with me outside of class, or, when we were finishing up a coaching, like preparing for a game or whatever. Right. And so through the years, those similar kinds of things started happening. And I thought, I want to be the person who's going to have the magic bullet. I'm going to solve this problem for bullying, because that's one of the bigger problems that we discuss and that we know that parents share, right? Bullying is rampant. Mental health concerns are through the roof. Social isolation is on the increase. In North America, suicide is the second cause of death of teenagers. We need to be doing something about that. And so along that journey, I wanted to be the person who was going to find that solution to bullying and write a book and be famous and, help as many people as I possibly could. But what I found as I continued my journey in education, in teaching, in administration, and eventually becoming a school principal, I realized, and even my own personal development as I was growing and learning along the way, and what I realized that it's not about one person. This is about community. It's about relationship. It's about connection. It's about love and understanding and empathy and putting all of that together so that we all have an opportunity to contribute to making people's lives better. And that's why I wrote the book, because I thought, okay, and I did it right at the end of my career. So I had those stories and I had things, and my passion to helping parents and kids continues. It didn't stop because I closed that chapter. I was delighted to have had my career, but I was just finished with that. And I wanted to be able to go out and make a difference for more people. And so I wrote that book, and I'm now in the process of writing another book called Courageous Conversations in the Workplace. It's the very things that we see
I need that.
with teenagers and young adults. If they don't have people to support them and they don't have those tools and strategies like conflict management or, just leadership skills or just being resilient and understanding that not everything is personal. And we need to be able to navigate through life and learn and grow and fall down and fail and get up again and keep going and take that lesson or those lessons with you to make you bigger, stronger, and better. But what I'm noticing is because so many people don't have those skills, they're in workplaces now and similar things are happening there. Bullying is rampant. Mental health concerns are through the roof. Social isolation, absenteeism is bizarre. And some of those people who are in their workplaces, I found out this new word recently called presentism. It means that they're just showing up. They're not doing much, they're just there, right? And so we need to be able to understand and have different conversations with people. And rather than just saying, oh, well, that's just the way they are, we'll find out why it's just the way they are. Ask a question. Engage them in conversation. Be curiously engaged. The very skills that I teach families about are the same ones that I think are perfect for business and because what ends up happening, and this is the disconnect that I think people don't recognize, is that when people are at work, if they feel that they're not listened to, that they're not respected, that they're not really sure if they have worth there or they're valued for their work, then they come home and one of two things happens. The first thing that could happen is that they have a family that's so excited to see them and wants to do good things. And that keeps them going, right? Because then they go to work and they bring home the money and they have fun with their family and they treat them well and so on. The second person, and they're angry and upset and frustrated and so on, and that shows up at home. So now there's a possible increase in, if there hasn't already been, then there's an increase in domestic violence. There's an increase in alcoholism. There's an increase or a start in drug abuse and so on. And then that family is left in that chaos. And then they go back to work and they show up that same way. And nobody ends up being happy. And it just leaves that family with no support or no understanding about how do they deal with it and how do they work through it to have a better life. So we're in a fairly serious space at the moment. And we look at that and it's almost worldwide because we look at the wars that are happening in countries. We look at, the tumultuous behavior that's happening in the United States. things that are happening in public office here as well, where, people are disrespectful, where they don't listen to each other. And that's what we need to do more of. We need to be still for a moment, and we need to be, just like you and I are right now, intentional with each other, listening, asking questions, trying to understand different perspectives, and being able to use that knowledge to improve the world. Well, we're both so busy fighting with each other, and we all want the same thing. We all want good education. We all want good health care. We want safe and caring environments. We want to be supported. We want to be valued. And yet we're unwilling to listen to anybody else's perspective. We don't have to agree all the time, but hearing and understanding where someone else comes from their experience, from their background, it can only help the situation. It doesn't need to divide us like it is right at the moment. I'm just a tiny bit passionate about this. Could you tell?
No, I am impressed, and it gives me that fire, that energy again to like continue to do what I do, because you have your platform through your books, and I have my platform through my podcast, and we're all trying to make the world a better place, like you mentioned. So it's not game over. No.
Oh, it's just a challenge, and we need to be disruptors, right, of the old pattern, of the old behaviors,
Yes,
and
exactly.
come to something new where we can have empathy for each other, where we can understand, where we can be compassionate, where we don't have to have this big hate on. We just need to understand.
Yeah.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much,
This was
Elizabeth, for
fun.
that. I have some more questions
Yeah.
for you. Okay, so somebody is just tuning in to us halfway, midway to the conversation, and they might say, why do I need to listen to Elizabeth? Like, what makes you an expert in your field? Becoming a podcast host was a natural extension of my second act. Now, after spending 15 years in the corporate world, I've transitioned to helping individuals overcome challenges like navigating tough relationships, career burnout, and aligning their mission with their soul's calling. By certifying as an RTT hypnotherapist and a lifestyle coach, I've made it my mission to empower people to recreate the life they deserve and building a supportive community through my podcast. Now, let me ask, are you facing challenges like struggling to reprogram your mind to attract wealth, weight issues that feel like a constant yo-yo, insomnia or restless nights from daily worries, or just a lack of confidence in public speaking? If the answer is yes, visit www.thenickyarsholisticlifestyle.com and grab a free hypnosis audio of these common struggles. It's a sneak peek into how my coaching works. Are you feeling shy? Don't be, because I'm as real as it gets. Let's connect on Instagram and LinkedIn and start your transformation today.
Well, a little bit about the 35 years in education and the families
That's
and
3
the
decades,
kids
okay?
that I've grown to love and admire through my years. And also, the opportunities to have learned from so many, to learn from families, to learn from kids, to, go and take and be part of professional development, because I felt that that was important for me too. So when I come to this space now, like I have the experience and the stories and the excitement and the enthusiasm of my career. And I just want to share, to have people just take a look at things differently.
Ooh, okay. What I think we did touch on this a couple of minutes ago. What are a few tips you can provide for our audience that would help them have a better, more connected relationship with their team?
Well, I have 5 strategies of dedicated listening that I use, and they're not in any particular order. And I know that we don't have very much time left, so I'll give you the top 3. And the
That's
first one
okay.
is about understanding versus judgment. We need to be able to move our
Yeah.
judgment out of the way and understand where our kids are coming from. Because when we look at behaviors, right? Behaviors are a form of communication. And whether it's a behavior that's defiant or it's a behavior that's quiet and hiding, there's still an opportunity for us to be curiously engaged and ask questions, or, I call them sentence expanders. So tell me a little bit about what happened in your day to day. Or, like I you can say even as a parent or as a teacher or, a coach or something. I was listening to this podcast, or I saw this article, or I read this, I listened to it on the news or so on about, say a current event. What do you think about it? What would you do if you were that leader in the world, right? So that you're not necessarily, your kids aren't necessarily feeling like you're attacking them with questions, right? Inviting them into conversation. So that's a different place, because oftentimes, we're frazzled at the end of the day when we come home at work and, "Hi, honey, how was your day?"
Sure.
Well, the parent might be excited to ask that question, but the child might not necessarily be
Oh, I see that
sharing,
with my
right?
sister every day.
But
Yeah.
here's the clue to it. Here's a little nugget in between. You're going to ask that question, or your mother's going to ask that question, or your father, excuse me, and your sister is likely to say, "How was your day?" "Fine," because, these are all 4-letter words. "What'd you do?" "Nothing." "Well, what do you mean you did nothing?" Right? So your escalation, or your parents' escalation, goes this way, and your sister's escalation goes this way into apathy, right? So then up goes the hoodie, in goes the earbuds, out comes the cell phone, and she's gone. But here's the
Yeah.
nugget. Don't ask them about their day, because they've been in that day already for 8 hours. They're trying to get out of it. They're trying to move
Out.
that day away from them for a little while until they process, until they figure out what's going on. Because chances are great they've been with those kids that whole day. They've been with those teachers the whole day. Good things have happened, bad things have happened, any place in between. They're feeling anxious about what's going on, or they're supposed to be studying for a test, or something's coming up and they're nervous about it. Some of those things that I shared before about how they feel in their life, right? They want to push that away for a little bit of time. So rather than asking how was their day, ask them, how are you doing today? How did they
Mm.
how did the day land for you? Tell me a little bit about something that made you laugh today, or something that, was a little bit strange or unusual, or something that made you feel uncomfortable, or you saw something. Tell me about some of those things, and just be open to allowing them to share that. And sometimes it is about allowing that time, not as soon as they walk in the door to say, "Hey, how was your day?" But rather, "You know what? Why don't you go put your backpack down, or, or do what you need to do for a couple of minutes. I'm making a tea or a sandwich or something," right? "And come and join me in about 10 or 15 minutes. That should give you a little bit of time to, relax and unwind. And then let's sit down and have a little bit of a conversation, so that it's not aggressive and, at each other, but rather an invitation to conversation. Because the inquiry and the being curiously engaged is not for the intention to be aggressive, but rather to find out more about that child, about what's going on, about what makes them happy, what makes them sad, or so on. Because we seem to be in a space in our world where everything is already at arm's length, where, oh, they're fine, they'll be okay, they're just having a bad day. Well, find out. So another one is about intentional time. And this is what I have conversation with parents about often, is to put down the cell phone, turn off your own, turn off your laptop, turn off the TV or the radio or whatever it is that's the distraction, and have that intentional time with your child. And the reason that I say that is because we don't spend that time. We are often too busy. Excuse me, too many things going on in our life. And what I say to parents is, busy, busy, busy is always going to be there. We are never going to win that battle against a busy life. And so what I say is, busy, busy, busy is always going to be there, but your kids might not be. Now, and I leave it there with a bit of silence for a period of time to say they might grow up without you. They might not feel like they can trust you to come and see you with their problems. But the other thing is that they might choose a direction that's not a safe, or they might choose that nobody's listening. They choose a permanent solution to what you and I know might be a temporary problem, and they might take their life.
Mm.
So that
Yeah.
intentional time doesn't need to be a full day. It doesn't need to be that, you need to stop work in order to have this day and, plan it in an aggressive kind of way, but rather just maybe even spending 20 minutes just having a conversation or playing a game together or going for a walk or an activity, excuse me, or participating in an activity that you're, in your case, with your sister, right? Going to an activity that she does or saying, hey, teach me how to play or teach me a little bit more about this or tell me a little bit about, why you chose this activity. What makes this important to you? Probably nobody's ever asked her that question, right? So that's really important too. The intentional time needs to be something that you also put in your calendar, and that nothing can get in the way of that unless it's some death in your family or someone is in critical condition someplace. But outside of that, it needs to be time that we really make intention. And for the first couple of times, and parents say, "Wow, I tried this and it didn't work." Well, yeah, because you've never done it before, and so there's a trust space that needs to be created too. Is it going to be something where you as the parent are just going to talk at them, or is it going or give your opinion and you never listen to them, or is it a place where it's a mutual kind of bonding? And that takes time. And often parents will say to me, the best places that I have conversation are usually in the car because the two people are far enough away from each other and they have their personal space and their personal bubble, but they're close enough to be able to engage in some of that conversation, right? And it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
about, like my father
Yeah.
used to always say to me, look at me when I'm talking to you. For me, that's not the important piece. Doesn't matter if they have their hood up, if they've got their ball cap, their their baseball cap is down. It doesn't matter. It's not the looking, it's the listening that's critical.
And they're listening. And even if you're yapping on the side and you think that they're not, but they're actually a few days pass and they say, "Oh, I thought you said this. Oh, I thought you didn't hear that." Because you were on it.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. What does reframing your behavior look like?
Well, it really is about, first of all, understanding it and then saying, is that the best way to approach the situation? So that kids learn that the way that they show up might not be the best way to engage in other people's conversation, whether it's their friends or, kids on the playground or their teachers or so on. And sometimes that just you need to understand why they've chosen that behavior and then say, okay, how could we make it work? Or what do you see that could be different? Because when we're trying to change someone's behavior, we need to have them understand the impact of their behavior. So, as an example, a parent might be one who is a little bit assertive and they're always yelling at their kid, or that's what their child hears and feels like, that it's always a yelling kind of thing, or it's always being told what to do as opposed to having some different kind of conversation. So when you look at that, the parent needs to understand that they have a responsibility in this conversation as well. And this is part of what I help parents with, is to have them be responsible for looking here and understanding that, yes, they have a background. And I always point back here because I think my background ought to be back there, right? part of that comes as a filter in front of you. It's the way you see things, the way you hear things, the way you speak. And your children also have those filters too. So they hear you, even as a sister, they hear you in a certain way. They expect that you're going to know everything and that's all you're going to do is you're just going to tell them that. So that's how they listen to you. And then when they see you, how you demonstrate what you're saying or not saying or the lessons that you're trying to teach, they get to see that. And they also have conversation with you when you're sharing and they're listening and they share with you. But the piece that's the most important is that after you recognize what's going on for you and being honest about how you show up and saying, I get that sometimes I get really angry with you because I ask you to put the dishes in the dishwasher, or I ask you to put your cup in the dishwasher and you leave it right on top of the dishwasher, like on the counter. You talk, why is it you can't put it in the dishwasher, right? So something as simple as that, but recognizing that, yes, I get angry and it's frustrating for me and I don't want to be yelling at you and I don't want to have to ask you 10 times. And it hurts me to continue to have to do that. But here's the other piece. But I also get the impact on you must be frustrating as well. And you must be, and you could guess at their feeling. And they'll certainly tell you most times that, you hit the mark or you didn't. And so that way there's a recognition of the impact of how I'm showing up in the relationship. And they also get to see, wow, that might be a new space for conversation. That might be a new space to understand somebody else's impact. So when you don't put that cup up there and I've yelled at you, you probably think that I really hate you, right? Because kids often think that, oh, my parents hate me because they're always yelling at me. Well, let's take a look at how that impact that comes this way. So when you don't do that, I feel angry and I feel upset too, because it really hurts me inside when we can't work this out. And it could be, like the plate or the cup right on top of the dishwasher. It could be something really simple, but acknowledging how I'm showing up and how it impacts you. And then the impact that comes back this way too. Because it makes me feel like you don't respect me. It makes me feel like you're not interested in listening, right? And so it gives them an opportunity as well that you've recognized how they feel.
Yeah. Wow, I am gaining so much insight and realizations about some of the things that I've conducted myself around my sister, like how I've conducted myself around my sister, and also recognizing how my parents are with her, and also my interactions with some friends. And thank you
You're
for
welcome,
this, Elizabeth. So what are you working on currently?
A couple of things. Actually, I'm meeting with a group of parents and trustees and school principals in the next little while. And so I am sharing a lot of this information with them too, just for them to recognize different ways of having conversation and, reducing some of the conflict that might happen and having them understand too, how they show up is important for their kids. The other piece of what I'm doing is right at the beginning of December, I'm putting together a webinar on how to survive the holidays with your teenager.
All of the
That's right.
families are together.
And
Yeah.
part of that needs to be to have
That should go on. That should go on Netflix. Like we have all of those rom-coms that how to survive through the holidays with your team.
Yeah, because part of that is about conversation too, and being able to recognize that, sometimes it is uncomfortable to be with parents and with, a whole bunch of adults, and they're asking you questions and they want to know what's going on. And so there's a place for that too, but there's also a place to be able to allow your teenager not to have to be there the whole time, and recognizing that maybe it's important for them to do something different too. and not to escape, but, allow them that space to do something and then come back. And then maybe, you know, have a new tradition, some crazy kind of tradition where instead of making gingerbread men, they make monster people or something, monster cookies. Just something that, because it allows them to be heard and valued and understood, and being able to navigate that, because that's really what conversation is about. It's a lovely dance, right? You're navigating, and you're trying to find out how this dance works. And it's okay not to know all the dance steps.
The dance of
Yep.
energy. Okay, Elizabeth, we're going to pivot to a self-worth question. So I choose one question for each of
Okay.
my guests. So the question for you, how does the process of self-discovery and building self-worth differ for introverts and extroverts?
Ooh.
And what unique challenges might each face?
Well, that's an interesting kind of question, because I fit into both of those categories. I think,
Me too.
introverted in some environments where, if you don't know people, or it's something that you haven't experienced in the past. That all comes for me, though. And even in an extroverted space, to go into something that's comfortable, right? People that you already know, or a skill or an activity or whatever, where you have a comfort space. But both of them, for me, are tied with courage, because it still takes courage to do that. And it takes courage to step out of your own comfort zone and have a conversation with someone you don't know, or go to an activity. So, as business people, we're often told that we should go to networking events. Well, they're not always my favorite space, but I have to make an effort to step out into that space. And so for me, both of those are tied to the whole idea that I have to have courage to step out and do what I need to do. Did that help answer the question?
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. What is your heart's greatest wish?
Besides having peace in the world,
Yeah.
what's my heart's greatest wish? That people would take the time to listen to each other and to reconnect, to establish heartfelt relationships.
Do you have a mantra that you live by?
Actually, I do. And it's in my book, so I have to bring out so I don't know.
Can you show us
Sure.
your book?
Here's my book called Courageous Conversations, a guide for parents to understand and
Wow.
connect with their teens. So in my book, I have a really great, I like a particular song that's written by the group. I don't know whether you're familiar with them. Their album name is Raise a Little Hell. Raise a Little Hell. That's the name. That's the name of the album. And the words of that particular song are very meaningful to me. And so I read them frequently, and I listen to them. And the quote, and I wrote to this group, and I asked them if I could use the lyrics in my book. Yeah. So they thought it was really kind of cool. So the lyric, the two lines that I use are, if you don't like what you've got, why don't you change it? If your world is all screwed up, rearrange it. So that's what I want to do with all of these.
You don't like what you've got, change it.
Yeah. It's a good song. You should look it up. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening, and the world is your legacy, what would
Step into your conversations with courage.
Thank you. I have been dreading a conversation.
It's on the back of my business card.
Oh my God. Step into
your conversations with courage.
Your conversation. I think this is a cue for me to step into the conversation that I have been putting aside. Yeah, I've been putting it off. Okay, that's the sign. Okay, from the universe. So how can people reach out to you, Elizabeth?
They can reach out to me if they go to my website, which is www.courageousnetwork.com. So I certainly love it if people would connect with me. They can also, if they just want to send me a little email and they have a question or a concern, they could reach me at Elizabeth@courageousnetwork.com.
Awesome. Okay. And do you
I
have
do.
social media? Okay.
I
LinkedIn.
sometimes hang out from time to time, and I haven't been very consistent with it lately, but I need to start again in Facebook and LinkedIn because there are lots of business people and, parents who are interested in both of those. And then I'm trying to do a little bit more because I have barely done anything in Instagram. So I need to start getting in there and just, giving little tips and suggestions and ideas and so on. And if it can help people make a difference, then that's what's most important.
I love it. And there you have it, guys. You heard it from the person herself, Elizabeth Bennett. Before we close off, I'd like to thank you personally for the work you're doing for the world, Elizabeth, and for advancing every step of the way despite the challenges. Your dedication is truly inspiring. And for our listeners, this has been that one podcast with that controversial name, You're Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. If you find yourself thinking that you are worthless, you're not alone. But more importantly, ask yourself a deeper question. If I'm worthless, then why the heck am I here? It is because your soul has chosen to be here energetically, coming all the way from the ethers. For that reason alone, you are worthy, you are enough. This has been Elizabeth Bennett, your guest of the day, and I'm Nick Nieras, your host, signing off. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for
Thank
your
you,
time.
Nicolette.